Hey everyone, it's Debbie, and I'm back again with another new podcast with someone across the globe. So excited to talk to Raphael today from France. And Raphael Sirtoli has a MS in molecular biology and is doing neuroscience research as a PhD candidate in the health sciences at the Behavioral and Molecular Lab in Portugal. He is understanding metabolism, nutrition, clinical medicine, and that's the base from what the program we're going to talk about, Nutrita, the knowledge it derives from. And he loves to have scientific debates. He loves CrossFit, football, hiking, different types of medicine, and of course, cold water immersion that a lot of people love to do. But myself, I like the hot therapy, the infrared therapy, and going to a short dose of cold therapy, walking outside. But hello. Okay, I have Raphael on the show today to talk nutrition and fat loss and performance and longevity. Thanks for coming on the show with me to talk about how we can really take care of the whole individual right now, especially during a stressful time in our whole world.
Well, thanks for having me on, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, we can talk about all things stress, lifestyle, health, and even coronavirus related if it calls us.
Yeah, well, as I was just saying that I focus on fat loss, and we've talked about low carb in the podcast. We've always 10 years ago we were talking about Fit Fat Fast was the name of the show, and now the low carb athlete. And it's always about teaching people how to be fat adapted, burn fat, and improve performance in daily life, but also athletic performance. But then always my big overlier concern is how people can improve the aging process, longevity. So not just looking at how am I going to perform this season in whatever race I'm doing or tomorrow at work or whatever it might be, but let's look at the big picture, longevity. And this is an important part to talk about with the coronavirus going on and connecting our whole world together, that the really stresses importance of self-care and taking care of the whole person from the inside out, as I keep talking about every day, with what I call the WHOLESTIC Method, working on nutrition, exercise, and sleep, and stress management, and movement, and digestion and gut health. So key. And then there's hydration, of course, and my eighth element is really important right now: happiness, joy, play, laughter. And I think all these things is so essential. And I found in my research, starting to dive deeper into presentations I was giving the next few months at these conferences about chronic stress and performance and longevity, and chronic stress impacts everything. And I came across your website, your program that we'll talk about today, but how chronic stress does impact your ability to burn fat. Chronic stress does impact your gut health, immune system, digestion, and all of that. So before I ramble on anymore, talk about kind of what your background is, and then we'll kind of get into what Nutrita is about.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Debbie. It's really a topic that's worth diving deeper into. And although my background is in molecular biology and health sciences more generally, and with a particular focus on nutrition and metabolism, chronic stress just keeps rearing its head in very much every aspect of our life, whether that's stress around our nutrition choices or stress around catching an infectious disease, which is of course very much the case at the moment, or whether that's just this sort of angst that people feel about not having a direction in life. I mean, it comes in all sorts of forms, and this is where, of course,
we just lost your sound. We can't hear you. Hold on. Frozen. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my background is in molecular biology, is the subject in which I did my master's, and health sciences is the subject in which I'm doing my PhD currently, and more specifically neuroscience. I'm looking at the behavior of rodents and we try to model schizophrenia in them and try to understand their metabolism and the side effects. And then we also put them on a ketogenic diet and try to see if it can mitigate some of the side effects. So I'm very much interested in metabolism, nutrition, and sort of mental health. So of course your question about stress is super important, and I really do appreciate it, because it's often the sort of variable that we lose sight of when we're troubleshooting our diets and our lifestyles, and we sort of know it's in the background but prefer to think it's half more of one half more of an avocado is going to solve it, right? Rather than confront some deep angst or some stress related to a relationship or whatever it may be, basically. So yeah, my background is pretty much I try to take as much as I can learn of evolutionary theory, evolutionary biology, and sort of this whole paleo approach and sort of the mismatch hypothesis of health. And I think it's a really important lens through which to try to understand things like stress and how our modern lifestyle isn't really conducive to having a low a low level of stress we can cope with, rather than this high level chronic stress that we seem to can't get rid of. Yeah. So I think I really try to frame it in this mismatch form, and then of course I'm lucky enough to be able to experiment very much on myself. So I try to see what works for me and others around me, and try to apply all sorts of things such as breathing techniques and good nutrition and cold exposure and all of those things, including the social element. So we can dive into any of those variables.
Yeah. So going back to your background, are you from France then? And is that where are you from?
Yeah, I'm born in Nice in the south of France. Oh. I was brought up there until I was 17, 18, and then went to university in the UK. Not even to study science, actually. It was a business degree. And that became pretty boring pretty fast. So I jumped to a science degree and did my master's, and now a few years back.
So in looking at the behavioral molecular biology part in neuroscience, what is your kind of main focus there? You talk about nutrition and keto with rats and different things, but is that more like behavior as being able to focus and ADHD and ADD, that kind of stuff? Or what's your kind of main motivation to go that direction?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, there just wasn't anything in the literature about schizophrenia and ketogenic diets in rats. There really wasn't much, if anything at all. And there's very little in humans, but there are actually now a couple of pilot trials, some case reports that have been written up. And I think a lot of sort of indirect evidence for the effect of diet on mental health more generally. So my motivation was really to add to that in the topic that my lab was exploring, which was schizophrenia and mental health, and specifically looking at certain brain areas like the dentate gyrus of the hippocampus that is involved in memory formation. So when we talk about behaviors in rats, we're sort of talking very loosely about this mix of things that we could call memory plus cognition and sort of mood. And we sort of use these terms very loosely, and it's not a good thing. Researchers shouldn't do that, but it's very hard to quantify. So when we talk about rodent behavior, we're talking about, in my model, for example, how they react to a very loud sound. Are they skittish? How many times do they groom per minute? Does that tell me they're anxious, or does that tell me
how they groom? How does the rat groom?
Yeah, like how it sort of like licks itself and nibbles on something and cleans itself. Yeah.
That's a grooming. That's funny. I never thought as rats grooming themselves. Okay.
Yeah, they clean and all of that.
So did you focus on mitochondria in there at all? Because it seems like that would be connected. I keep focusing on that area myself, mitochondria function, because it seems
right.
connected.
So in my project specifically, we're not doing a lot of mitochondrial lab work. We're rather looking at sort of protein or genetic scripts and inferring how those relate to mitochondrial function. So this is the route we're going, but in terms of, the general effects of the diet on the rats or the ketogenic diet in general on humans, certainly mitochondria are super, super relevant. I mean, a lot of the beneficial changes that we get by, ditching our standard American diet and going to a well-formulated ketogenic diet certainly happen at the level of mitochondria and, how this basic energy processing happens.
So we call it a standard American diet. What do they call it in Europe?
We call it standard diet, I guess. We just don't put our own country's name in front of it, but we should.
Well, it seems like it was more American influence for the fast food restaurants, because I know I've been traveling in Europe a lot, like every year, every other year we go to Europe, and there's not fast food restaurants and crappy food everywhere.
That's true.
Do you find, well, in the UK, there's a little more in London, but do you just find in Europe compared to the US, and I mean, Canada isn't even that bad, but the US seems like it has like the ultimate processed foods. And even I see it when I was traveling in Spain, and I just said I was in Portugal last September. They had stores that were American stores that had all the cereal, American crappy sugar cereal that was like a place to go, and you can eat cereal that Americans eat. That's all sugar and crap.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, of course, I think a lot of the industry and sort of avant-garde, technology that came from the States certainly imported it to the rest of the world. But, I think in the end, the junk food is truly widespread. And it's funny because it's so widespread now that at least as regards my travel, it's not a big issue for me. I just happen to eat a basically 95-99% carnivore diet. So it's pretty easy to find some meat or some fish or some eggs or some bacon, generally speaking, even in the States. So to that extent, it's not a problem for me. But of course, if you're eating anything that's supposed to be a nice mix of meat, fruit, vegetables, that's going to be a bit harder, because there are more pieces to that puzzle you have to get right, and you have to know about which crappy oils you have to avoid, and you have to watch out for added flour or sugars and sauces. So it can be a bit tricky. But when you're on the sort of diet that I am, that tends to be much simpler, it's actually paradoxically, I guess, easier to follow.
Yeah. And that's what kind of we'll get into next, the Nutrita program and, nutrition. But I find that eating more carnivore, and I don't like to label anything, or I don't like to be on a diet, but I find right now, especially when have this stay-at-home rule going on, that being more of doing intermittent fasting, everything we talk about, and we'll probably talk about with you too, but we always do intermittent fasting. You end up eating, low carb, higher fat, or more keto carnivore. I do more. I'm not strict, only eat carnivore, but it's funny how it's just easier because I don't have to eat that often, and I can have my coffee and my tea, and I do that in the morning. And then by the time I eat lunch, it's kind of my lunch dinner. So you end up eating one main meal, and I just have a steak and then put some butter on it. And it's like, I don't need anything else. And so I always keep kind of laughing at, the world right now, and at least around here, people panic about buying all this food. Okay, one, if you listen to what we've been talking about for 10 years or more about nutrition and immune system and being healthy, we wouldn't be in the spot we are in, as bad as this whole damaged gut health and immune system. That's one area to talk about today. But also how if you do intermittent fasting, like 16 hours, and eat in an 8-hour window, and you do low carb and eat more protein, or eat for your metabolic type, bioindividuality, I think is key. But you're full and satisfied if you eat the right, real nutrient dense foods that are good for you. You don't have to eat 3 meals a day and snack. And so I'm trying to tell people, breakfast, lunch, dinner equals go outside and walk. It doesn't mean eat. So eat like in between your walks, and just think of it not time of day. Because I think when people are stuck at home and they are just bored, and another thing I just said, are you eating mindlessly or mindfully? And it's so important right now. So talk about your perspective on nutrition, and let's dive into the Nutrita program and how that works.
Yeah, so we can start at the sort of the simplest level, and what really I'm preaching and what the app is trying to get people to do quite simply is really avoid sugar, flour, and high omega-6 seed oils. Those are what we call the junk food triad. So that's, I'll repeat it again. So it's flour, so anything from bread, pastries, donut, that sort of stuff. Sugar, so I think everyone understands that. Fruit juices, sodas, sugary cocktails. And then there's the more insidious third leg of the stool, which is the seed oils. And those are high omega-6 seed oils, meaning that they're sort of sunflower oil, soybean oil, wheat germ oil, rapeseed oil, all of those things that we would not have been able to extract in large amounts before we had the very modern machinery that's necessary to do that. And to some extent, you could say the same for sugar and flour. So these three agents that sort of arose when we started having this industrial revolution, at least when it really took hold, these are the agents that are really, really doing us harm. So if we can avoid those, I think that's something that pretty much close to every dietary philosophy that has any scientific backing should be able to get behind, I think. So that's why I'm very adamant about people sort of trying to stick to those three things. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy. I mean, sugar, flour, and seed oils are in everything, right? I mean, they're in everything.
I must add, especially hard when you're in Europe. I don't do it here, but you go there and there's really good bread and I'll put like a ton of olive oil on it, but I won't eat it here. In a croissant in Paris, it's hard. And then in Portugal, we tried, which you should never have one because then you just want more, that pastelli di nata. It's like, okay, those are not like on my do not eat list, but I can't imagine living there when you're around all that amazing bakery bread and not have bread. I always think that'd be challenging.
And it's I'm sure you've spoken about that on your show, right? It's, you have to figure out why you want to avoid it and what's it giving you back, and that requires experimentation and some trial and error basically, and then it's just up to everyone to make the choice. But if they at least understand the potential benefit there, I think that's an excellent starting point for any diet. If you can sort of understand that, okay, those are the things I'm trying to avoid. Then of course the other side of that is that you have to have something that you replace it with. It's not just about taking things away, it's about what you put in. And at the simplest level, the most sort of scientific thing I can say, and it is actually quite simple, is eat a lot of animal foods. So without specifying exactly how much or which plants or that sort of stuff, my general view is if you're eating quite a lot of animal foods, the plants, fruits, nuts, all of that stuff, you'll pretty much tend to gravitate towards the stuff that you feel you do well with and are additive to your diet. And as long as you're, making the base of your diet out of animal foods, you're really getting all of the essential micronutrition that you need. And depending on, your own personal views about, is it better to have a bit of plants or actually quite a bit of plants and make it more of a totally 50-50 mixed diet, that's fine. If you're still avoiding the sugar, the flour, the seed oils, that's totally fine to experiment with. And you can go from carnivore to, sort of mixed omnivory and be, on a healthy diet. So our goal is to help you find your place within that spectrum. And we don't care what you eat as long as it's getting you good results and that you're within that sort of spectrum that makes sense for humans according to the science and everything we know. And and the app is to help you track that food and hit some specific protein targets and carb limits and reach the sort of goals that a lot of people have, like fat loss, controlling blood sugars, just eating a nutrient-dense diet, or just putting on muscle mass. Like, a lot of runners realize that, hey, I love running, but I've been doing this 25 years now, and I could need a bit of muscle. So we're not just helping people with fat loss, we're helping people with body composition. And I think that's something we have to pay attention to with the age.
For sure. I think a lot of people have issues with food too, though, talking about trying to get rid of eating bread and, food that talks to you, and sugar, because it's so addictive, is why people feel better when they're off of it and they lose those cravings and their blood sugar stabilize and their body's less inflamed. But how do you work with in your program, it's called Nutrita. Is that how you say it right? I'm saying
Yeah, it's Nutrita Pro is the app and
Nutrita Pro.
Nutrita is our company.
Okay. So do you work with, your focus is a food tracking app to
Yeah,
help people figure out what to eat based on their goals, as you just said, fat loss,
yeah.
health, performance, muscle gain, right?
Mhm.
So what about food emotional eaters and people that have food addictions and need to work on that relationship with food? Do you find that kind of those personality
Mhm.
types when they're tracking their food, that helps them? And then also there's people that are, have eating disorders, or, because we've been talking about this lately, a lot of addictive personalities that tracking, they get to be so obsessed. So like, how do you
Yeah,
make this a healthy, sustainable experience for people to get results and not go
right,
psycho and not
right.
be like addicted to sugars?
Yeah, so what we offer is for anyone who signs up to the monthly or yearly subscription that we have. Everyone who signs up can set up an appointment, and they'll be speaking either to myself or an expert in the team that can help them sort of get their head around the app and the goal that they're trying to get to, and sort of basically answer a lot of their questions. People have questions about, oh, should I keep things in the house or out of the house? How strict should I be? How do I make intermittent fasting work with my schedule? I really have trouble with this kind of sugary sweet stuff, but not this other stuff. So what can I substitute it with? So all the sorts of, normal questions people have, they can always actually speak to someone from our team when they sign up to the app. We know that if you're not really speaking with with someone about these things, it's going to be difficult to find all of the information online. So that's one way we address it, to have someone you can speak to right up front. But after that, we sort of try to let you make choices according to how well you're doing with our scores. So we offer some unique scores that other apps don't, such as the insulin score, the keto score, and the nutrient density score. So these really help people. So if you're following a keto diet, obviously you want to have a good keto score, right? To see if your food choices are actually helping towards
So,
your ketogenic goal.
so you're saying measuring your ketones, measuring your blood glucose levels is
No,
your
not at all.
score?
Actually, it's really simple. You can just
Okay.
look up a food and we'll tell you if it's keto or not. So
Mm.
basically, we have a big database of 20,000 foods and over 150 professionally curated recipes. And you can look stuff up and see if what you're planning to eat today, fits within a ketogenic pattern of eating or not. So you don't have to understand the whole complicated science behind it. You
Mm.
can just get a 0 to 10 estimation. And so that's very helpful for people who don't have a scientific background, who are trying to follow a ketogenic diet.
Mm.
So that could be for someone following a ketogenic diet and with the app, or they could use the insulin score, for example, if they're trying to control their blood sugars. And having a low keto score, generally a low insulin load for the day, is a good thing because it avoids to have these big blood sugar swings. And if you can keep this insulin low and stable and pulsatile, just when you're eating and you're not snacking throughout the whole day, right? So we're helping you keep an eye on that with scores that you wouldn't get in other apps, because we think those are going to matter more than this sort of extremely strict calorie counting that doesn't really do anyone any favors.
Yeah.
So, and when you sign up to the app, we actually ask you how many times a day do you eat, and how many, do you have strong cravings, few cravings, what's your situation there? Because we actually want you to keep track of that in the app. Now, I think it's useful for most people to do it once, or at least initially, and do that for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But after a point, the idea is that you actually do this yourself, right? You've understood the principles. You understand that nutrient density is really the quality aspect of your diet, and then you can use these other scores if you happen to want to follow a ketogenic diet. So the app you can come back to and leave it, and it's really just a tool for you to make sure you're staying on track, and it's up to your personality type really to determine how much you're going to want to use it.
So you have different plans on here. So based on probably your kind of interview and consultation with them, people can help figure out which plan to choose based on their personality and types of food that
Right.
like I'm not going to eat
Yeah,
liver.
we can talk about that in the initial free consult that they get when they sign up to the app. Or they can, they've probably already selected a goal when they've signed up to the app. They already have something in mind, and we're just there to basically advise them along the way. We can talk to them, for example, about their carb limits and how to spend it, right? So if they say, hey, I really have this issue where, if I don't have this sugary thing, this candy when I leave work, then I really need it as a pick me up. So we can talk about substitutes, right? What other snack can you have? Can you order something that's more keto? Can you find something in our food database that's going to give you a good idea? How about you try to follow one of the food lists we have? So I think by exploring the app and speaking with us, people are going to realize what sort of better behaviors they can substitute in for these bad habits that they've acquired over the years. And I think it's about going through the options and sort of acknowledging not everything works for everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in your program, do you help people write? So people write in their food log every day. Do they have to track every day, or is it like after a while, say 1 month, people do it every other week? And
So
how
yeah,
often
it
do they
kind of
see?
depends of their goal basically. So for example, if they have a weight loss goal, or I'll take my example. I have a goal to gain a couple kilos of muscle mass, right, over the next few months. So I have this at the top of my dashboard. I can see where I am for my goal, and I know that I'm going to try to hit above my usual caloric intake. I'm going to try to eat more than I usually would. And I'm also going to make sure that I'm eating enough high quality animal protein. So my own target currently is around 200 to 220 grams of protein. So I can track that pretty easily. I can do it just for my breakfast if that's what I'm interested in, or I can do it for the rest of the day, or I can do it for weeks on end, because we know consistency is key when trying to gain muscle mass. And you can apply that sort of same reasoning to any other goal you have. It's really up to you to decide how much you need to track. We just think it's good that people who sign up for a goal usually have been struggling to do that for quite a while. And usually they're not getting accurate information, either because they're trying to measure things like calories that are very hard to measure. And even if you could, that's not how, losing fat works. It's not a calorie game. It's a hormone and metabolism game you have to play. So we're trying to sort of bring their focus to things that tracking should make easier, meaning hitting a carb limit and a protein target is much easier than trying to get an exact calorie goal. It's actually much, much easier. So depending on what you score and depending on what you value, what you follow day to day, it's interesting. People sort of are used to follow a calorie goal in an app. And that's incredibly boring, to be honest. I've never done it. And we built a food tracking app. So we said, okay, if you can follow your nutrient density score, now that's more interesting, because you're learning what really makes your diet nutritious, irrespective of your macronutrients. And I think that's something that's sort of new to people, and can give them a lot of value actually when trying to troubleshoot, because whatever you think of your diet, if it's not truly nutrient dense, like something's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I just know I was one of those people, like most all of us, that grew up dieting a lot and eating, just everything fat free. And, I didn't eat much proteins. I like the ultimate high carb diet of healthy, real foods, because I was always into nutrition. And so the just typical story of someone that was following the food pyramid and thought they were super healthy until I figured out like the zone diet and all that, and went after Atkins. So I figured it out on my own, starting to stop and think, how does this make sense for me to burn fat when I'm eating so much 3 times a day and having a snack? And how am I supposed to lose fat weight when I'm going for, start doing long bike rides and training for events that, like, okay, I'm supposed to eat every hour and drink how many calories? It made no sense to me. So, teaching people to be fat adapted, and because most people probably come to you that are sugar burners, what's kind of your process to get people to burn fat? And I know you have lots of things. I have your program open here on my iPad, but the insulin index and hormones, and what kind of process do you find you've had to do with people using your program to be flip the switch from a carb burner to a fat burner?
Yeah, that's a great question. The easiest way we found is generally to advise people to go low carb. And it sounds sort of obvious and simple, but in a sense, it's pretty much a general guarantee that you're going to be more likely to be burning fat if you go lower carb. It's just easier. That doesn't mean that there aren't super lean, high carb athletes that are good fat burners. But for the average person doing the average dietary change, going lower carb, which is pretty much the option that our app offers to different degrees, will really help with fat burning. And that's largely dependent on the fact that you're lowering insulin. And because you are, like me and you, Debbie, and everyone else, part of this modern world where there are about 1,000 different ways for your insulin to jump up during the day and stay chronically sort of elevated and stopping you from accessing your own fat and burning it. We try to get people into a lower carb range. So depending on your exact goal, if you're going for blood sugars, we think it's really important that you sort of give your pancreas and insulin pumping a break and sort of just go keto basically. If you're trying to lose fat, we'll get you at least a low carb, and you can adjust the carb limit downwards as you see fit, or even increase it if you're getting good results. So pretty much we tend to ask people to go low carb, but there's more to it than that. We also, in our blog post, we explain how if you're going to have carbs in a meal, it's better to have them at the end of the meal, right? After you've had the sort of fibrous veggies and meats or fish, for example, because this actually has an impact on gut hormones, which stimulate insulin. And if you can have the sugary stuff towards the end of the meal, sort of like we would in a traditional dessert setting, let's say if we were in France, we might have like some steak and vegetables, and at the end we might have like a flan or something like that that's sweet, like a sweet yogurt. It's better to have it at the end of the meal. So for a given amount of carbs, you can stimulate less insulin and have less blood sugars rising in your blood. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of a specific sort of hack, you could call it, for people to control their blood sugars. So total carbs matter, when you have them matters, and also the quality of the carb matters. So we were talking before about avoiding flour. Well, let's say 10 grams of flour from bread has a worse effect on your blood sugar and insulin than do 10 grams of sugar from a low sugar fruit. It ends up being sugar in your blood. That's the same. The difference is what it's doing to your gut hormones and how those gut hormones talk to your pancreas that stimulate insulin, or talk to your liver that's going to have a big role in how much blood glucose you produce. So we're trying to get people to understand that the qualitative aspects of their diet actually really matters. And although we definitely have a low carb bias, because that's where we see people get best results, mm-hmm. we also want to recognize that when you have it matters, the quality of your carb matters, and even the food order, as we mentioned before. And I think that can help empower people to sort of have additional ways to tweak their diet and just make it easier for them, right? They have these principles, and then they can feel empowered when they go to the restaurant. They know that just by not ordering something super sweet as a first thing, that can help them with their blood sugars, and they might just have it for dessert. And now they know they've made a good choice. And I think it's good to give people tools where they feel like they're making good choices, and that they actually are good choices, reflected in their blood work.
So you talk about insulin, but talk about hormones and fat loss, and right. The gut hormone connection, and talk about that, because I think that's a great area to go into.
Yeah, fat loss is really interesting, because I think a good way to think about the problem we're trying to solve when we're trying to lose excess fat, right? Obesity is not a weight problem. It's really technically a problem of your fat mass. That means your adipose tissue, your fat tissue, is growing way, way, way too big. It's somehow mopping up all this energy from your bloodstream, and it's not really, it's. So the question is, are you just putting too much energy into the system? Or is something, are the parameters of your body, is the levers that are being pulled somehow storing energy rather than using it up, rather than burning fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way to think of obesity is that we've got these set of parameters that are actually biasing energy to go towards fat. And what we need to do is to sort of reboot those parameters. And fundamentally, it's a totally different approach than the classical calorie counting approach, which is by hook or by crook, just figure out a way to lower your calories. I don't care if you run. I don't care if you starve yourself. I don't care if you just eat, 5 pounds of potatoes a day and that makes you so sick that you don't want to eat as much as you normally would. But whatever it is, just, eat less and move more. Fundamentally, I don't think that's right. I think that's not where the problem is.
Yeah.
Of course, you can see effects of fat loss just by restriction, don't get me wrong, but they're not sustainable. You tend to lose a lot of muscle mass. It tends to be miserable. Your hormones can tank. You try it, it doesn't work. You're not paying attention to food quality. It's a very blunt stop sort of, people give this model way too much credit. I think for fat loss, people should focus on keeping their insulin low. They should understand that if they have a lot of stress hormones floating around, they're more likely to store fat, especially in their gut area. They should understand that actually obesity is not the problem per se. Obesity is your body trying to protect you from these excesses of energy they're sort of like power surges. If your fat tissue isn't there to fill up, well, that energy is going to go elsewhere in your body and cells are going to have to deal with it. And they might get, their fuse might blow and you might have all sorts of other issues. That's why we see this sort of paradoxical case where they're what we call the metabolically healthy obese and the metabolically unhealthy normal weight people. And the people who are obese, their fat tissue is actually doing their job and they're delaying the onset of diabetes. Whilst in the very lean people who can they're basically unable to get fat. I mean, we all know people like that. They just, you do what you feed them what you want, they just basically won't get fat. Okay, that may seem good, but actually they're also not buffering this excess of energy and they may be more prone to diabetes, for example, or some other health issue. So it's crucial that we understand that fat tissue is not the bad guy here. It's trying to protect us from this metabolic mayhem. And the best way to help our fat tissue is to lower insulin, lower inflammation, get our circadian rhythms in order. And if we have any obvious hormonal imbalances, that could be because we're taking contraception, that could be because we're on certain drugs, to understand that it's how they mediate, energy storage in fat tissue. And I think once we have this view, we don't have to be, there's less despair, because once we realize that one approach didn't work, well, there are 20 other things we could do to improve our biology. But if your only tool is a calorie counting, that's very, it's heartbreaking when you're like, I tried it, and it's just not working.
Yeah. And that's goes to the next question is chronic stress is, we mentioned a few times that chronic stress is why I found your articles on chronic stress and blood sugar, because that was my story. I was doing fasting. I was the low carb athlete, training for Ironmans and marathons, fasted workouts, as bulletproof coffee way too much every day. And I wouldn't eat much. But then I gained 30 pounds. And that was my story. I wrote Life is Not a Race in 2013. I went from top age group triathlete doing Ironmans in Ironman Hawaii every year. And then I was just broken. And so 8 years later, I still have dysfunction in my cells and mitochondrial damage, oxidative stress, and gut dysfunction. And so my purpose now and passion is to help other people avoid this. So that's kind of my whole mission. But I think it's so crucial to explain, especially with the coronavirus going on in our entire world and connecting us all together, that the importance of not feeling this sense of stress, but also how stress impacts your fat ability to lose fat weight. Because you can do all this and still maybe not lose fat weight because of the chronic stressors in our environment, but also hidden internal stressors that you don't know about unless you've run labs. And then also, if we next after that, remind me, go into chronic stress and gut health and immune system, if you want to get into that at all, because I think it's so essential to share this information now and get people using programs like this to start taking care of themselves. It's just frightening to me, you know, where we are at in the world with this virus, but also it's just a big red flag that we need to start taking care of ourselves. If you want to protect yourself from dying from a virus, it's all you taking responsibility of your own health and doing all these lifestyle behaviors and eating right for your metabolic type and having a nice healthy gut biome. But this just proves that most people don't, even though you're healthy on the outside. So I'll get off my soapbox, but you can go into now chronic stress and fat loss.
Yeah, chronic stress is an issue where even after you've gotten everything right, you're eating the foods that nourish you, you're avoiding the junk food triad that we mentioned earlier, you're eating lots of animal foods, you're not eating too many times a day, but you're still struggling to lose weight. You know, that can happen. And one factor is the fact that when you're chronically stressed, you know, your blood sugars shoot up. You have, you know, your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate increases, your thinking sort of narrows, and that happens on a very small level. Even when it's not this very obvious heart pounding effect, your physiology is really moving away from rest and digest and is more into this fight or flight mode. And you know, it's interesting, depending on, it's not clear in which direction stress always goes. For some people, it really does, you know, seem to lead to, at the very least, behaviors which lead people to sort of, you know, eat junk food and make bad decisions. I think there's a big component of chronic stress where it just changes our behavior and we're not thinking as clearly as we could, and we just make bad choices, and that leads to a lot of weight gain. But there is also some evidence in the physiology where we have some hormones that can actually worsen, for example, the impact of fructose on how fructose gets metabolized and gets stored in our body. We can have cortisol sort of interacting at the intersection of fructose and fat storage and increasing the odds of storing, you know, circulating energy around our gut, around our belly, essentially. And stress is also terrible because, you know, in some people it actually causes weight loss, meaning stress actively sort of forces your body to burn its muscle in a sense, because these large releases of adrenaline can cause muscle tissue to degrade because they are precursors to blood sugar, which your body may be getting from your muscles in this circumstance. So there are many effects where stress is not only, you know, sort of bad for fat gain, but it's also bad for maintaining muscle or muscle gain. So it's sort of this dual action. And one thing people can do, and this is not really to say that meditation will make you slim, simply to use common sense, and that meditation is a very much an traditional, I would say even empirically based technique to reduce stress levels. It's actually relatively simple. There are no profound side effects, and it's free.
Yeah.
And it's safe, and you should probably do it. You know, all of us can probably use a little bit of meditation.
I just found, by the way, a research article on PubMed that said for chronic stress with meditation and the microbiome, how it improved it by doing meditation.
Yeah, I think they're going to see that it has wide-ranging effects because it's changing the action of your nervous system, and your nervous system innervates your gut. I mean, it's everywhere, right, in your body. So we shouldn't be surprised that it has these profound effects, and it's just going to make everything you do easier if you're not doing it under stress. So even without having to necessarily identify very specific mechanisms for fat loss, you can rest assured that it's simply going to be more conducive to regaining a hormonal profile and a metabolic function that's in this sort of, you know, nice, steady fat burning, purring machine state of, you know, fat burn.
So is that, you think, related to people being that fight or flight, we call sympathetic dominant, that they're in fight or flight so much that they lose their resiliency to go back and forth between the parasympathetic nervous system and back to the sympathetic, that so many people, as what is, good stress versus bad stress, acute versus chronic, that we'll get into the lifestyle behaviors of acute hormetic stressors, but the constant sympathetic dominance that we get kind of stuck in, is that what you're saying? The nervous system meditation will help us be able to relax and switch back and forth between the two.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how really where we direct our attention has a massive impact in our physiology. Meaning, if I just happen to be thinking about stressful subjects, I eventually express that stress. It's a very normal thing, and ultimately it's about really sort of getting your mind clear of a lot of the concepts and memories and other ruminations that we have that really weigh on us. And I think one thing people might want to try, other than meditation and understand that as a benefit, is breath work. And I think both breath work and meditation actually can help with sleep, which is probably a large reason why not being stressed out is good for fat loss. Simply because if you're not stressed, you sleep better. If you sleep better, well, that's great news for fat loss, because there are so many experiments showing that you can make people a borderline diabetic by, keeping them up at night for, just for a day, for example.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you realize that sleep is key. I mean, we can make, just by not even changing the calories of mice, just by changing their circadian rhythms and messing with their sleep, we can make them gain fat mass and lose a muscle, even if they're at the same body weight. So they got fatter without gaining weight. Like, there are all these very clear experiments. So if, dealing with your stress is a way for you to sleep better, and fat loss is your goal, go for it, because you won't be wasting your time there.
Yeah, no, I spent all day, and that's finishing it today on a blog on chronic stress and sleep and how they're connected. And because I'm writing this self-care, since I'm stuck at home for probably 2 months now, and how to do a self-care with the WHOLESTIC Method ebook. And so it's just, you get amazing on the research articles on sleep and how it impacts all the elements of the WHOLESTIC Method. If you lack of sleep, nutrition, exercise, your stress, obviously, and movement, and the gut health, and how it just, all these elements impact another, happiness, right. And so it's so crazy when you dive deep into that. But I will say that with chronic stress and, lack of muscle, that's what happened to me, being from, a top athlete, and I was fit and strong, but then I gained 30 pounds in it was 3 months, but it felt like overnight, and I lost a ton of muscle. And it is that hormones that gets imbalanced and everything else, this whole domino effect that happens on your inside. And that's why I'm really trying to help people realize that they need to run the lab test to see what's going on under the hood, because you have no idea what's dysfunctional and what's, contributing to your imbalances and your loss of homeostasis, that you're just kind of guessing. So those people that are trying nutrition and they still are struggling, I think the next step is to do, look at the whole picture and work on the functional labs for those hidden internal stressors. Do you guys suggest that at all when you're working with people that it's like, okay, I'm still not, getting where I want to get, what do I do next, and working on lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when people sign up to the app, one of the things we ask for are blood results. So if you don't have your lab, that's fine. You can still proceed and get your account set up and start tracking. But we do ask for it because, we want to, first of all, we want to know if what we're telling you is working at a very basic level. And I think you should want to know as well.
Yeah.
And it is true that, like we mentioned before, there are people who just get bogged down in tracking, and that'll always be an issue to some extent. But I think everybody should face their issues, try to get some quantitative measures of things that might be relevant to their condition, not freak out about it, just have it there, keep an eye on it, and actually make changes that are going to get you any improvements that you seek. So to that extent, I think the app is going to be super helpful. It's going to be tracking really the basic factors of your diet that are going to help with your lifestyle. Of course, in the first free consult people get, I would love it if people were interested in stress management, although most people are just interested in diet, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to send people towards resources like Wim Hof breathwork, which is technically called hypocapnic hyperventilation, and it's been studied in clinical settings and has shown actually 100% success rate in terms of completely stopping the symptoms of sepsis in people who were injected with lipopolysaccharide, meaning we had 12 subjects who were supposed to have an immune response induced by this sort of pathogen that the doctors injected, excuse me. And these people were all able to neutralize the response completely simply by applying this very simple breathing technique. And now medical textbooks are being rewritten to show that the autonomous nervous system that was previously thought to be, well, independent, autonomous, is actually partially within your control, especially through applying proper breath work. And now we're seeing it's affecting immune function. So this is some very strong science that I think doesn't get enough credit because we love to talk about diet. But as you've brought me to talk about stress, I'm so happy to hammer that nail home. And yeah, breath work, meditation, and good sleep will just be an immense sort of return on investment for people looking to get healthier.
Yeah. I thought I'm already up on time with you. I'm sorry. There's so much to talk about with you because it's all my holistic method is kind of what you practice too and preach. So to improve our immune system, let's finish up with things that we can do because these are all free things that people can take away with now. So let's maybe finish up with some tips on immune system, which is our gut health, but lifestyle.
Yeah, so I would say the first tip I have is start doing cold showers. And this is usually done in conjunction with breath work because actually the breath work is what elevates your body temperature and allows you to sort of stand the cold shower and not be a complete torture. So this is, just go to the website wimhof.com. And I think he's called the Iceman is his nickname. And there's some super interesting stuff on him. But basically cold showers. So that gets back to the general principle of cold exposure. And cold exposure is simply exposing your body to the cold, whether that's in a lake or in your bath or just by walking outside when it's kind of cold and not having a big jacket on. This forces your body to maintain its core temperature. And in doing so, it keeps your body at the right temperature. And the right temperature is important to fight viruses, to fight infections, to maintain proper gut function. I mean, temperature is everything in biology. Ask anyone working in a lab, everything is temperature controlled. Enzymes work at certain temperatures. Viruses propagate more or less at certain temperatures. So not getting air conditioning to outsource all your body control is going to be a wonderful thing for your immune system. So that's, I guess,
So breathing exercises while you're in the cold shower. What about infrared sauna? Oops, and pause or whatever.
Sure.
So infrared sauna, I have a Sunlighten infrared, the full near and mid infrared sauna. I've been trying to use that more lately. Is that beneficial? Is on top of the cold therapy?
It seems like it is. I haven't really looked very deeply into the science behind the infrared sauna, but it does seem to, elevate body temperature, which is the goal of a sauna. So to that extent, yeah, it's useful. And not only the extremes of cold, like we just mentioned, the cold shower, but also the extremes of hot is part of the hot-cold training that your immune system benefits from when your body can maintain its body temperature within two extremes. So, running outside when it's super warm in midsummer is a form of heat training. You produce heat shock proteins and all sorts of other beneficial, molecules from that. So cold exposure, hot exposure, infrared or something else, even working out hard essentially is heating your body up. So you're also getting benefits in terms of the heat when you work out hard. So this is the temperature tip, and then of course the tip for having your circadian rhythms properly aligned, and that's blue light blocking glasses at night.
Mm-hmm.
Not having bright lights that are from your screen or from light bulbs, and just disrupting the release of melatonin. That's really important, not only for sleep onset, but also going through the proper sleep cycles. A great person for people to learn more about on that is Greg Potter. So he's a great person for people to look up when it comes to sleep and sleep hygiene and sleep practices. And yeah, avoiding blue light at night and looking at your phone in the middle of the night is a great thing to get better sleep.
Yeah. So give me one more tip and then we'll wrap it up. So we've got ice therapy, cold therapy, which I was doing last week, working out, yoga in the morning, then walking outside because it's cold here, but now it's warmer. But just, cold showers are hard to do. I know my friend does a cold freezer makes. Brad Kearns does this whole thing. But then, and with Wim Hof breathing. And number 2 is, working on sleep, but avoiding the blue light with glasses. And we have a couple great podcasts with this really young 18-year-old who created this blue blocking glasses. He's super brilliant, but he has tons of good research. So the third one for our immune system, what we can do now, what would you suggest?
Well, I guess this can be somewhat controversial, and I'm not telling anyone to break the law, but social contact.
Yeah.
Social contact is so important. I mean, there's a pretty sad example, but I think a telling one. One of the best predictors of people who get cancer and who make it and who don't is how much, are they visited by friends and family in the hospital? Do they have a support system?
Mm.
Do they have the humans and friends in their life to really tell their body, hey, you're not alone. There are people here to take care of you. You're safe. This is a very basic social feedback loop that we have with people around us. And yeah, we all have our personality. Some are extroverted, some are introverted, but we all need some degree of real human, physical, face-to-face contact. And that is so important with regards to things that people wouldn't, barely believe. Even in terms of all-cause mortality, when we look at factors like, pollution, smoking, diet, crime, like the very big picture stuff, social isolation and the lack of social contact is probably in the top 5, if not top 3 of factors determining, just overall likelihood of death. I mean, it's crazy how undervalued it is.
So that I'm going way over time, but the blue zone study with people around the world. Have you read that? So people that lived to 100 years old, and the lifestyle habits. And that was a lot of sense of community, being outside, moving, being active. But what's interesting to me is what happened with the coronavirus in Italy, where you think everyone's just happy and thriving and they eat well and they have, this sense of community and love of life. And then they had, so many people die and just so much tragedy in that country right now. And it's interesting that you think of that social network and the connection and all these things, that these lifestyle habits that Italians have, that, why were they so ill? But then I was just reading something this morning. A lot of them already had health conditions, and maybe it's the medical system. But it's interesting that how important social interaction is to health and improving your immune system, and how it's a struggle because we're going to be, stay at home rule, I think for another month, at least where I am in Seattle, where people should stay at home, and how the importance to reach out every day, like doing FaceTime calls with a friend, making an attempt each day to go, okay, who do I know that I'd love to see, or that I know is struggling and being alone? Like I have my husband and and it's great for us, but I'm afraid of people that are by themselves or single people, and then friends and family. And I think it's so important to make an effort every day to, reach out to one person, FaceTime, not on the phone, but you need to see. And that's why I've been podcasting every day too, because it's really nice for me to start my day working at home all day. And I haven't left my house for 5 days, I realized.
Right.
Reaching out to people like you. And I talked to someone in London 2 days ago, I said, and someone in Australia on Tuesday, and it's so much more fun. So anyways, it's just that social interaction is so key, but also you need to still work on your other nutrition habits, as we talked about earlier, to be
Yeah.
healthy on the inside out.
Yeah, and I agree. You know, nutrition is the stuff of life, so that's always going to be at the forefront of our minds. But yeah, don't forget social connection. We're all animals on this planet. Temperature matters, light cues matter, stress, whatever that form it takes, matters. And once we can really get that framework into our mind, we're just much more powerful in terms of affecting change for our own health and those around us. You know, it's one of those things where it's actually, you know, empowering, I think, to understand how much good you can do to yourself and those around you with some, you know, they're both small and big things, right? It's a small thing not to avoid a toxic food. It's a big thing socially sometimes. So it's a mix of big and small things, but in the end, I think if we get this good picture that's based in science and, you know, that's actually has some backing in terms of the evolutionary logic behind it, we can be pretty certain we're advancing in the right direction. And so, yeah, I just encourage everyone to keep, you know, questioning the health advice they're being given by everyone, you know, including myself, and to reach out and ask questions and challenge, and don't rely too much on expertise and authority. You should also rely on your ability to look at things for yourself independently. If you have the time and means to do that, please do it. I think it's important in these times. And yeah, and have a laugh.
That's what I've been trying to do, and put funny posts on my social media. And I have a little rebounder here that I have for the infrared, and I had people, you know, bounce and play, and, you know, I was doing dance moves and stuff and jazz hands. So you have to find the laughter into each state of happiness. So anyway, so the website is Nutrita.app.
Yep.
Is the app and the website. And you have great blogs on there for sure. People can dive in. And then we have a code to give people, LCA, for Low Carb Athlete 30. So LCA 30, and I'll put that in the show notes. To get 30% off is huge savings. So people can work on that now. I think it's a really good opportunity to start taking care of yourself and eating. You're eating at home, staying at home. So this is the time to start doing all these things we're talking about. You know, do the cold showers, work on figuring out what nutrition plan is best for you to lose fat weight, to be healthy, mentally strong, to improve your sleep and fat loss, but really working on boosting your immune system by improving your gut health. And that's by eating real good, healthy food that's best for your body. So I thank you for giving that huge discount for people. And any
my pleasure.
Other links we want to put in the show notes, we can. And I thank you for your time today and diving into some little hacks we can add into our lifestyle and science.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Debbie, and great questions. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, best of luck to all your listeners with the sort of crazy times we're dealing with. But take care of yourself and reach out, ask questions. Don't hesitate.
Great. All right. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.